Hi, and today I want to talk about one uh, very important item for which most of us have been gnashing our teeth and wondering when shall we ever resolve this issue about Zambia benefiting from its minerals. For the last 56 years or so, this has been a problem. Our country is the second largest producer of copper in Africa and the seventh, largest globally. Yet our country, Zambia, is too poor, with more than 24% of our population living below $1.25 and per day, and 43% of the people being undernourished. This is largely due to the hemorrhaging of our wealth by the transnational corporations. According to UNCTAD, United Nations uh, Conference on Trade and Development, in its report on 2020 entitled Economic Development in Africa, Zambia lost more than $12.5 billion between 2013 and 2015 through trade misinvoicing, under declaration of exports, and many other fraudulent activities. In fact, all of us Zambians, and even us who have been in government, we know that we have been losing about $2 billion a year from tax avoidance, which is about 10% of our GDP. The foreign mining companies, in this case, as far as I know, are the major culprits who use transfer pricing, particular transfer pricing, where parts of the same company trade with each other at prices that they determine on their own, and each other at the prices determined on their own, and the over reporting of costs, and also under reporting of production, to the extent that Zambia is always the loser. It's strange, for instance, that we as Zambians, our experts, report that the biggest trading partner in copper, for instance, Zambia, is Switzerland. That's where more than 50% of our copper goes to. And yet, this open country as Switzerland reports that it never imports anything from Zambia. And we have never, as a country, wondered why this is so. When we ourselves we report that we export almost 40% of our copper to Switzerland. But Switzerland has never reported back saying that they also have been importing any copper from Zambia. In fact, there is zero imports from Zambia. And yet that's our statistic. And shouldn't this raise a red flag among our policymakers? It has never done so. And between 2015 and 2019, we've seen and learned widely that there has been several discrepancies between what we export and what is reported to be received by the recipient countries. And I want to give examples of China and India. Between 2015 and 2019, Zambia was reported to have sold 634,000 metric tons of copper to China. And yet China reported that they bought from Zambia about 1.5 million metric tons of copper from Zambia. This was a discrepancy of more than 870,000 metric tons, which turns out that there is $8.2 billion, which could not be accounted for. The same thing for India. where we reported that we sold 38,600 metric tons of copper between 2015 and 2019 to India. And yet India itself reported that they bought from Zambia about 483,000 metric tons of copper, which represents a discrepancy of more than $4.5 billion of non-accounted for export trade. Now, the same thing is with all other minerals, including cobalt, where a delegation from Zambia a few years ago visited China, found that a company in China had been importing $20 million worth of cobalt from KCM every month, and we don't have those statistics. This situation for Zambia, in my view, has been compounded by the overly generous tax incentives which we have provided to these multinationals, which allows them to go scot-free and keep on hemorrhaging our country. There is no reason why, for instance, we charge 30% of corporate income tax instead of the 35%, which everybody pays. The royalties are also, quite, small compared to other countries like Ghana on their gold and so on. And we've given them, several tax holidays. The ZRA has even the discretion, to allow the companies not to defer payment of any of their obligations to government. There is a 0% per annum on dividends instead of the normal 15% or 20%, for all others, for these mining companies. The companies, the mining companies, contrary to law, are even allowed to maintain their accounts, in dollars, in foreign exchange, in foreign denominated, currencies, which is totally unlawful, in Zambia. But they are allowed. They were given all these incentives, and they are given several deductions where they're able to deduct their capital allowances by more than 25%, and they carry losses for more than 10 years, and they don't even pay any customs or any other duties, on their mining equipment. All these taxes, all these incentives are purely a subtraction on what Zambia should be getting. So, combined with all what I've said, Zambia, what should we do? The Honorable Minister, Mr. Stumbeko Musokotwane, will soon be giving his budget speech, in which he will outline how we intend to raise revenue, to stop or to try and eradicate our poverty and underdevelopment. And like my good old friend, when I was serving Libya, told me, God was so kind to us that he enabled Zambia to have at least copper and cobalt, as well as our water resources. In the same way, he gave them oil, our brothers and sisters, the Arabs. And they've been able to use those resources to invest in their countries, and been able to deal with the issues of poverty eradication. In our case, we have not. And it's now 56 years since independence. We are unable to use what God gave us. And all of us who teach microeconomics to our students, was to tell them that the sum of all economic activity in a country, namely the GDP of a country, is equals to the consumption, of the country, plus the business investments in the country, plus the government the government expending, namely the budget, plus the net exports of the country. The most important in this, from my point of view, is the net exports, and as well as the business investments, which must be tackled with of course, with good enabling legislation. But in our case, the net exports were hemorrhaged by these multinationals, as I've just indicated earlier on, and we have to stop that, because we need to have a situation where we start accumulating investable surpluses to expand our production and deal with this underdevelopment and poverty of our country. And this can be done by principally being transparent in our we must adopt a developmental state program that places that puts in place and enforces a fair tax regime where Zambia is able to accumulate investable surpluses, and also, of course, introduce anti-corruption safeguards and rules to ensure that we're not cheated as we've been cheated in this past 56 years. There have been programs which have been suggested by UNCTAD, suggested that we need to have a mineral tracking system to detect illicit trade practices which drain billions of dollars from Zambia. And other researchers have come up with a person like some lady in our blog, Michelle Morel, indicated that we needed to do. It's important that we audit the whole value chain of production, from production up to export. Dealing, from the time the company mines the mine, it crushes the stones, the leaching, the financial accuracy, the exports, as well as the environment, to determine the real costs of these mines. At one time, this was done in Tanzania, and where they reduced the hemorrhaging from 104% to 0.75%, all purely by ensuring that we have a group of Zambians trained to ensure that we pursue and get to know how and close the loopholes where we are always cheated. And but more importantly, as the minister comes to give his his announcement of our budget for 2022, it is important, of course, that he has to address this issue of the tax regime. When President Mwanawasa with Peter Magande were in charge of the financials of our country, they came up with something which I thought was progressive. At the time, I was also in government, where they introduced the windfall tax regime in 2008, and that was very progressive. In fact, we had been advised by Norway and other countries, who, including the British, where this thing happened, where the windfall tax regime was introduced by the Labour government of Prime Minister Major, to where because you recognize that we don't have a capacity to address or to manage or to monitor payment of in the normal way, or where you pay tax through by charging the corporate tax through the direct means of taking profit as a taxable thing. That what we need to do maybe is to find a mechanism where we start sharing excess profits, particularly now that the copper is so much on demand. The Zambia's copper, the break-even point for the produce Zambia's copper is about $2,000. but now per ton, But here now today it's more than $10,000, and according to the various studies, we even go beyond the 15, next year, $15,000 per ton, because of the demand for electric cars and things like that. And so, we should not be left out. We need to find a mechanism, a method at which we are able to get our best we can get from our copper, and during the time when Mwanawasa and Peter Magande introduced the windfall taxes, the tax system, that year, 2008, we're expecting more than $415 million as tax, from sharing. At this point in time, we would be getting more than $2 billion every year as part of our benefits of, by adopting this windfall tax. But I'm of course perturbed and rather not sure, because I know that when the current minister was made minister by President Rupia Banda, he's the one who abolished the windfall tax system, and so I don't think he probably may not be inclined to revisiting it. But I would argue strongly that our colleagues in government must address this matter so that Zambia is able to benefit from the minerals that God gave us, rather than wasting ourselves. In fact, one of my colleagues, Jazo Banda, who now lives in South Africa, told me, you Zambians, if you cannot benefit from your minerals, why don't you just close the mines and let our children, when they come up and are able to do what is needed for, they will come and benefit. Because what is happening to us is that within the next 20 years, there will be no copper, and we shall just have holes looking at us, with environmental problems which will be left out, and we have no copper or no cobalt and no emeralds. But we can, as this generation, these people who are in charge of our government, we can find a mechanism at which Zambia